was at Synth Reactor in Germany. I was talking to my friend Brian from Arturia, and he actually said, hey, why don't you sit down with a Microfreak? And I was like, that's not really my deal. I saw a lot of people playing it, but I was like, what am I gonna do with a weird digital thing? And it's weird and it's small and I don't understand it. You know, like kind of old man grandpa complaining. And Brian's like, no, let me show you a few things on it, and I guarantee you're gonna dig into it a little bit. And I'm like, okay, well, this I got to see. So he sat down and he just showed me some things about the digital oscillator, which I'm now going to demonstrate to you. Which it took me about like 30 seconds before I was buried in this thing, excited as heck. And we'll see if you are too. Okay, so starting off with a digital oscillator, I have this initialized patch here. Nothing is really set to anything. All we have is a basic waveform setting on the digital oscillator. It is set to the basic waves oscillation source. So you find the type of oscillator here in the type section. So basic waves. We have basic waves, super wave, wavetable, harmonics, Carplus Strong, virtual analog, wave shaper, 2-op FM, formant, chords, speech, modal. So there's a lot of different oscillator types with a lot of different functionality and a lot of really cool outcomes. So this part of the video series is going to be long. So starting off with the basic waves. Right now we're in the basic waves, and so these four knobs basically give you the functionality that is present in the oscillator in any of the oscillator types. So we will essentially set a type and then see what these three knobs do to that type. In the case of the basic waves, this first one, marked wave, basically it is a continuous wave shaping from a square to a sawtooth to two sawtooths. So if we take it all the way down to 0, which I just did, we're going to get a square wave. Now I'm using the octave switch to hear how low we can get with that. Well, okay, so I am not obviously a guy who's that accustomed to using digital synthesizer, but I'm not hearing really any aliasing up in the... So that's nice. Okay, so that's our square wave, and you'll notice when I was using the octave buttons, it tells you what octave you're going into. So now as I turn the wave up, you'll notice it's changing. So continuously variable wave shape is a really cool thing because that means we can modulate the wave shape. Modulating the wave shape has always been my thing, all the way back to the Moog Micro Moog, which had continuously variable wave shape, because modulating that gives you such a depth and breadth and an acoustic sound that it's really a desirable thing. So we have that here. Now we have arrived at the 50% mark, which is the saw wave. So it has that same nice range. It sounds great over the entirety of its range. That's awesome. So everything under 50 before you get to 0 is a combination of a saw and a square. So if you are sitting here and turning this knob, you are modulating the wave shape, and it's expressive. You can make distinct intentional choices by modulating this sound with the wave. Of course, we're going to get to a point where we can modulate it with other things, but for now, that's a thing you definitely can do. Okay, and if we go from 50 and up, we're getting into 2 sawtooth waves. So you can hear the harmonic characteristics change. It actually sounds like it's adding an octave to me. So if you land somewhere around 75, it sounds like you have octaves. So that's your wave setting for the basic waves, and that sounds great. The next section is timbre, and what timbre is going to do is it actually messes with the wave shape furthermore. So if we have it at 0, which is a square wave, the timbre knob is going to give us pulse width modulation. And whoops, it goes from, I accidentally pressed keyhold there. It doesn't have a pulse width duty cycle of 0 or 100, so the sound never goes away, and that's good to know for modulation. And if you turn the wave all the way up into the 2 sawtooths, it actually phases between, it creates a phasing effect between the 2 sawtooths. Which is a really cool sound. If you happen to have your morph or wave section at 50%, there is no effect coming from your timbre or symmetry knob because it only affects the 2 sawtooths together or the square wave, and doesn't do anything just to the basic sawtooth wave, so don't freak out. Now this last section, marked shape, is actually, in the case of the basic waves, it is a sub bass. Which sounds really, really cool. And if you want to, let's actually take this up here. That way we have the 2 sawtooth waves. We have the sort of phase effect between them, and we have the sub-octave in the bass. Now, if you are a person, I'm just going to dive right into this. All you have to do is press a button. So I'm not going to explain it in its own video. Press a button. Pow, you have what they call paraphonic, which can be paraphonic, but also can be variophonic. There, I've used the term in a video. Okay. Variophonic. So I understand why they say paraphonic, because definitely you've only got one filter. And so it definitely results in paraphonic sounds, but there are some other factors that allow individual articulation in a variety of ways that we'll get to, which make it not sound paraphonic, especially since we have the ability to mess with harmonics in the digital oscillator, so we don't even need the filter, and as a result, it sounds like we're having filtering. We can do filter effects in the oscillator alone, and they can be individually controlled with the keyboard. So I'm not sure paraphonic is the right word. What they really mean, I'd say, is polyphonic, and it breaks it into 4-note polyphony. And since we have a sub octave going on, we have a really full sound. Now you can only imagine what sort of polyphonic sound we could get if only we started to modulate these functions, which we can do. I'm going to go up here to the matrix, which I'll explain in depth later, but for now I'm just going to add an LFO to our wave. And actually, I'm going to add an LFO to our timbre, and I'm going to turn it up. So all of a sudden, we've got this amazing chorusing effect going on in our oscillator that sounds great as is. Now it's actually pulse width modulation. Because I took the wave down into the square wave, I had it up in the sawtooth section, so we were hearing the phasing generated by the multiple sawtooths. So your polyphony sounds great immediately because you can get these really cool timbral effects in the oscillator. And now let's listen what happens if we add the shape, which is actually the low octave. You can get a really huge, big, full sound right off the bat, and you can modulate these things. Like, for example, let's do something weird. I'm going to bring in the cycling envelope and use it not cycling, and I'm going to make it so we can adjust the shape with something, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to let the cycling envelope not cycle and just be let's see, did that work? Okay, so that's doing this thing. So now I'm using an envelope to have the sub octave come in controlled by an envelope, so it comes in at first and then goes away. this is the sort of thing that we can get from the combination of the oscillator and the patch section, which again, I will talk in depth about, but you can see I have to cover it. I have to talk about it to give it, the most in-depth discussion of what this thing is capable of. Now, granted, I have been blabbing a lot and I did talk for 5 minutes, but here we are 15 minutes into this and I've only talked about one of the types of oscillators. That's what we're dealing with here. And this is basically what I'm going to do for each of the types of the oscillators. So there's going to be a lot of videos.